Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Celtics Chronicle podcast. I'm your boy, Adam Taylor, and as usual, I'm joined by my homie, compadre, co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Shields. What's poppin', Tim?
Nothing much, man. I don't know about you, but it's hot where we're at. We got a heat wave thing going on this week,
Oh,
so
dude, it's been
it's
killer
like
out here, man. No AC, dying. It's like, and look, you can go on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and you'll see a bunch of Americans saying England's not that hot. It's like 40 degrees Celsius, which is like, I don't know, close to 100 Fahrenheit, just over. But just no AC, dude. No escape. Talking of no escape, there has been zero escape from a Jaylen Brown trade rumor. Every single day, there's been 3, 4, 5, 6 new updates. This team's interested. This team's interested. Portland want Jaylen, but they don't want to give up Donovan Klingon. Portland want Jaylen, but they don't want to give up Denny Avija. Denver want Jaylen. Of course, they don't want to give up Jokic, and Boston don't want Jamal Murray. It's every single day, and every 20, 25 minutes, there's a new kind of caveat to what teams are interested, but what teams don't want to give up. And it's becoming really hard to see not only where Jaylen's value actually sits in the league, but also where a legitimate trade partner might be. It felt like this was a lot easier to look at through a lens of, well, if it's a free team deal with Jaylen going to Giannis, then going to Milwaukee for Giannis, then X, Y, and Z can happen. And right now that's off the board, obviously. It's like, where is he going to go and what is the return going to be? Is it going to be a top, like a tier A guy, tier B guy, or are we looking at young dudes plus draft picks? And this is kind of like a soft rebuild in the second year of what's meant to be a 2-year retooling window.
I think I'm teetering towards it's going to be one solid piece or a piece that you're buying low on, a couple of young guys, and then mostly picks. I think the understanding is that when they go ahead and they make this move, it's going to be a matter of JB's gets traded. JB just is traded wherever it may be, and then you're using some draft capital to flesh out the rest of the roster. Now, we've talked about it. At this point, it's like ad nauseum because there's been not a lot of news, and I feel like most of the NBA trade talk has kind of been put on hold. We've seen a couple small deals here and there outside of LaMelo Ball deal. That's pretty significant. But even then, that was still tied in with the JB stuff where Jaylen Brown, all of a sudden, there was a rumored offer from the Timberwolves, but they basically gave a similar deal to go out and get LaMelo Ball. That rumored deal was Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, and as many as 3 or 4 first round picks going to the Celtics in that hypothetical Jaylen Brown deal that fell through. So they're clearly trying to strengthen the front court. That's one thing. And it makes sense a lot of the ways of how they want to try and change their play a little bit, where they want to have more rim pressure. They want to have that pressure inside the paint. They want more rebounding. And you want to do it without sacrificing some of the flexibility in play, which means you're working with a really limited pool of potential players. Klingon fits that mold. I know that Evan Mobley got mentioned as a potential target. Don't know how that would factor with Cleveland or how they would plan into it. And still at the same time, there was the Trey Murphy interest. Trey Murphy still not traded yet. So that's another thing that is potentially waiting for this Jaylen Brown shoe to fall. And it sucks because if you're in the Celtics position, in a lot of ways, it feels like you're forced to give up Jaylen Brown. And we talked about this a little bit too off the air where there's an entire possibility here that they were going to move on from Jaylen regardless. Just the fact that you were trying to trade for Giannis in the first place is indicative of that. And it also kind of gives you this public cover of, hey, we put him on the table for a top 5 player in the league. And even then, like, there you had some people saying, oh, this player plus this amount of picks is not enough to get Giannis, or other people saying, this is crazy, this is ridiculous, they shouldn't have traded him. And now it's kind of devolved into this massive analytics thing. And on top of that, you now have Jaylen Brown like actively responding to all of it, which regardless of whether you feel he needs to be traded or he should be kept, that's a bad look. And it makes the situation even more complicated. So now you have this entire time bomb situation of a guy who clearly wants to move, feels very strongly about who he is as a player and how he feels about analytics and people twisting a narrative. And you now have to play damage control with that while also getting the most return that you possibly can, which I think brings you back around to you're getting a bunch of young guys, maybe 1 or 2 pieces that you could flip and turn around, plus picks. I think that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be a straight up star, or if it is a star, it's a star that's got a lot of question marks. I think that's where it's going to be.
Or is on the decline, right? Like if it's the Clippers, it could be Kawhi, who's
or if it's the Wizards, if it's Anthony Davis.
it's that type of issue,
shaky.
right? Shaky ground. I know that when I was looking at teams earlier that were rumored to be interested in Brown, and one of the key points that I've been very focused on when looking at potential returns is, out of the guys that come back, one of them needs to be somebody that plugs a gap in the rotation. And that can be positionally, or it can be skill set wise, right? Like a guy that's going to get down and pressure the rim. Denver is actually a team I've really struggled to see where the value would come from in one of those packages. The only guy that I like there in terms of plugging a gap would be Christian Braun, just because of his ability to get downhill. Finished in the 99th percentile of rim frequency last season. Finished in the 80th percentile of rim accuracy. So he was top 20% for finishes around the rim among wings. 71% shooting within 4 feet of the cup. And like, I'm not 100% sold that Braun's a guy that I'd want in a JB package, but he's a good example of there has to be guys coming back that don't just make up the salaries. They have to make sense for what this team wants to do. And I don't know if it was you I spoke about this with, or if it was Billy. It might have been Billy last week, where I was kind of pushing the idea of we don't know what Joe Mazzulla and Brad Stevens, what page those two are on. It feels like Mazzulla is still very much on the system that they won the championship with, the 3-point heavy system. And then obviously it feels like Brad wants a little bit more rim pressure, some more athleticism, some more explosiveness. And until we have an idea of the synergy between coaching and front office, it's really hard to project what type of guys Boston are going to go after, because are they going after guys that Brad wants, that fit a system Brad wants to see, or are they going after guys that fit the proven methods of Joe Mazzulla right now? And that to me is making it really difficult to look at these rosters and be like, this guy makes sense for the team because of X, Y, Z. Well, does he make sense because of what we're reading into things Brad has said recently? Or does he make sense because he fits into a system with Sim Mazzulla run and have a mixed bag of success within the postseason? That's been quite difficult. One guy I do think, if they were going to trade with in Portland, I'd want Tamani Kamara. If Donovan Clingan is truly off the market in terms of he's just not available in a JB deal, which to me is wild, right? We were talking about trading Jaylen Brown for a top 5 player in the NBA literally about a week ago, and then, or just over a week at this point, and then saying, oh, well, he's the best player in the trade. He's the best player that can be offered. And now we're like, oh, we can't even get Donovan Clingan for Jaylen Brown. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah, the narrative flipped way too quickly.
Way really quick, dude. And what I'm at is, I want Clingan would be my Grail pickup from Portland. Kamara would be the next guy along the list. You don't want to send Danny Avdija? Fine. You want Danny Avdija and Jaylen Brown there? Completely cool. I like Avdija, but you're going to need a playmaker if Jaylen Brown's your number one and Avdija's that guy for you. Fine. Clingan would have to be a non-negotiable for me. If you really push, then okay, I want Tamani Kamara, I want Shaden Sharp, and we'll see if we can develop Scoot Henderson. Thank you very much. That would be kind of what I'm looking at from Portland. Plus all the picks. I want Milwaukee's picks. I want your picks. I want everybody's picks. Give me all the picks. But I do feel like we're at a point where Jaylen's value has been decreased over the week. And part of me is like, is that because Milwaukee basically said Jaylen's not good enough? Like, is that how people are reading it? Because that's not how I read it. I read it as we're getting a bunch of young guys and draft picks where we're also concerned Jaylen's not going to want to re-up with us in a year or two. That's how I read it. If other people read it that Jaylen's not good enough, that's on them, fine. But that deal falling through for Boston certainly feels like Jaylen's value around the league went down. And coming off the season he just coming off the season he just had, that's really hard to swallow as a Celtics fan.
And I'm sure it's really hard for him too. Like Jaylen, from a very personal standpoint, like we know where his pride and his ego are at. And I don't blame him for being pissed about a lot of this stuff. Even if it is a situation where you think that there was some kind of backdoor wink, wink, nudge, nudge conversation between, Celtics ownership and Jaylen Brown, if he did actually want to go to another team and this is them making sure it happens, or if there has been some difficult conversations. And I do appreciate the fact that people are going to ask those questions. I also appreciate the fact that Brad Stevens is just going to keep it all in-house. because he's like, hey, I respect these guys. I respect their privacy. We've had some candid conversations, which is another way to say, like, we've had some animated conversations about this stuff. And I don't fault anyone for feeling any type of way about that. But I think the Celtics are trying their best to handle it in the most business appropriate way. Jaylen having the public stuff out there right now is not great, but at the same time, it applies a little bit of pressure of one, we need to get this done because the situation continues to devolve. And two, this guy's making a lot of noise because he wants to be moved. So, like, you've got his value getting negatively impacted by all of this public discourse. And then you also have this pressure of, like, this is a guy who clearly wants to be moved at this point. There is no bridge to be mended. Like, you think that there's a bridge at all at this point is, yeah, you're imagining things here. I think specifically with the aftermath of the Giannis deal, and I think understanding what Jaylen Brown's value is, those things are not synonymous. Like you were saying, like, you can say that Jaylen Brown has value, but the reason why the Giannis trade didn't go through had to do with the fact of him potentially asking out if he's not happy in Milwaukee. But also on top of that, like, and it took me a little bit of time to digest, right? Because I wanted a Giannis trade to happen because it was the best possible return you could get for Jaylen Brown. Regardless of what other pieces were in there, getting a top 5 player back who's still, even if it's towards the end of that physical prime, you think with Giannis, you're still getting a guy who's in his prime. And that's the best possible return you could have gotten. But the picks, and it's really the picks, because getting picks from Boston versus getting picks from Miami, when you know that Miami has to sacrifice every bit of depth and talent that they have to make a Giannis trade happen. So, like, that team, like, that's why Milwaukee was like, we don't give a flying F what your roster is after the dust settles on this trade. We do not care. We care about the best possible return. They got the maximum amount of picks that they could out of Miami. Miami got to keep one of their young guys that they wanted to keep. The rest of them, plus Tyler Herro, got sent out in this deal to make it happen. Now Milwaukee's got all of these picks from a team that they just took away. Pretty much all of the good talent on that roster has been scraped away outside of a few pieces plus Giannis and Bam. And don't get me wrong, those are 2 great cornerstones, but now you have to flesh out the rest of it without having draft capital, without having a lot of money to work with, and no, like, player talent to go ahead and try and hodgepodge together into an acceptable trade package. It was already difficult to do with Giannis, and now you have to do that without it. So I think that was Milwaukee kind of saying, we're gambling on Miami being terrible, whether they have Giannis or not. And now we for sure have sealed their fate in terms of, this is what you have to work with. Good luck building a winning roster. We're banking on your picks being good the next X amount of years that we have them. So they got a huge haul for that trade. And it sucks to kind of have to bite that bullet from a Celtics perspective, because now you're left with the aftermath of still having to deal Jaylen Brown. And again, if it's any consolation, I think that this was going to happen regardless. It's just now you have to think about what that return's going to be. I think the only thing that I am really, really solid on in terms of this return is that it is going to lead to them getting a big man. I don't know if it means that they're trading Jaylen Brown for the big man, or if they're going to get multiple players, young assets, picks, and then go around and trade for a big man. But I think that is the ultimate end game, is to get a massive upgrade at the center position. I think that's the only thing, regardless of whether Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla are on the same page in terms of roster construction. I think that's like the definitive thing that will happen, is they will upgrade that center position expeditiously.
I also think we're going to see a new guard. I think those are the 2 areas that we came into the summer expecting. This JB stuff has all come out of left field. If there was one guy I didn't expect to be floated in trade rumors this summer, it was Jaylen Brown, coming off an MVP caliber season, off a season where he takes the team to the 2nd seed in the East. But I understand why we're here. I understand that there's an impending eligibility for a contract extension that would pay him north of $70 million a season at age 33 and 34, or 34 and 35. I can't remember now. And then you factor in the fact that that extension doesn't kick in for 4 years. I genuinely have been wholeheartedly against it, offering that this early, like so far away from where we are right now. I've been against that. Not saying Brown shouldn't get paid. I'm saying he shouldn't get paid 4 years into the future when none of us know what that's going to look like right now. But you factor that into it. You factor in that, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is Jaylen Brown is Boston's best trade chip. He's the guy that's going to net them the pieces they need to be able to retool this roster around Jason Tatum in a way that can establish them as a threat for long term. Now, does that mean this team's going to be better without Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum as a duo? People are going to argue. Some will say yes, some will say no. People will point to analytics that say yes. And just as a point on the analytics, I've seen a lot of people saying, well, you can bend analytics to fit your narrative. I have had this argument many times when I feel like you say a take, and then people come back with numbers like, well, the numbers don't support this. And then they use the analytics to rebuke your take. It can be really frustrating because it does feel like you can bend and manipulate these numbers to fit whatever narrative you want. What I will say when it comes to catch-all impact metrics, Darko, estimated plus minus, LeBron, those type of metrics, RAPM, those metrics don't really get bent and manipulated in that way because it's very much a catch-all and try and establish a baseline of how we track impact. Brown ranks poorly on all of them. I think his Darko is probably the best out of the lot. And that's not to say Brown is a terrible player. It's just that in terms of advanced analytics, they don't value what he's doing because his game is very unanalytically friendly, a bunch of mid-range shots, high volume, not great efficiency. Now, the problem is once that made it onto social media, fans started to devalue. And sometimes I feel like the reporting follows the way social media kind of values a guy. And I'm not saying that sets a baseline in a front office or anything like that, because I genuinely don't believe that would ever be the case. But the information we receive, I feel like as Brown's value has gone down across people on socials, the reporting has kind of trended down with it. And then I feel like we're going to either be pleasantly surprised with the return that the Boston Celtics get just because our expectations are gradually being lowered, or we're going to be a little bit frustrated because maybe it is just a bunch of young guys in a salary match. And I think that's another area we need to be willing to accept, or at least willing to understand it's a chance where your best part of the return is going to be one or two young dudes that you're really hyped about that fit what Boston are trying to do now and later. But in return, you have to take on a shitty contract. That could be part of it. You could look at Golden State, and this is just an example because it fits the narrative I'm trying to build right now. You can look at Golden State, and maybe you're super stoked that you get Podziemski back, or they trade their pick from this year. What was his name? The big man they just drafted. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. Is it Lendenberg or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah, Axel Lendenberg. Maybe you get him, but in return, you have to eat Jimmy Butler's contract. Now you're going to be stoked to get the rookie big man. You might even be stoked if it's a Podziemski or a Moses Moody as part of that deal with the draft picks. But you're going to be upset that Jimmy Butler's had to be part of this to make the money work. And this is just an example out there that I'm throwing out there just to say, like, the return might be a mixed bag of happiness for you. You might be pissed at the contract that matches the salary, but stoked at the young guys that come and stoked at the draft pick. I just don't think at this point in time that we're going to be completely happy with whatever the return is on Jaylen, because it definitely feels like you're trading a one for many in this deal. Like one great piece who I'd class as like not a superstar, but a tier below. So if superstar is S tier, then we're looking at like a B plus tier to an A tier. And in return, you're going to get prospects, you're going to get potential and salary matching, and then draft picks. That is what it is. I'm okay with that myself. I just feel like we kind of need to adjust our expectations right now, because the teams that we felt like we're going to be the front runners just don't appear to be that way. It just feels like it's going to be a Washington. It's going to be a Portland. Atlanta don't even seem to be pushing as hard as what I expected them to be. And I don't know whether that's just because Brown's age doesn't fit their timeline, or they're just not willing to give up the pieces that it would take to bring Brown back to Atlanta.
I think Atlanta would have been more interested before the draft, and that's where I expected them to actually operate. I think if Atlanta's pick ended up a lot higher, because I think that was the pick they got from the Pelicans. I talked to you before the draft even happened. This is before they even had gotten really like knee deep into Giannis conversations. I thought if that pick from NOLA got high enough in the draft that they would try and maybe swing a trade for Jaylen Brown. I think the thing that's important to remember in all of this is, as we've talked about too, It's not the issue about the player, it's the salary. It's the fact of how much money Jaylen Brown makes on his own. And that's just it's a byproduct of the league. Like, they're paying him a lot of money, sure, but that's based off of what his benchmarks are in terms of his accomplishments in the league, how many years he's been in, how many All-Star games he's made, all NBA, all of that stuff factored into this payday. And this is just what the CBA is. This is just what this guy is eligible to make. And any other team that had the chance to pay him the most money possible on the market, if he had ever hit free agency, they were going to pay that. Like, that's what's going to happen. And from the Celtics perspective, at the time when they did it, it made perfect sense. Even if you potentially saw down the line where you're going to have to move off of Jaylen or Jason, and you know it's going to be Jaylen because you value Jason more in terms of overall, if you want to look at analytics, but just overall impact, you can say pretty easily that Jason Tatum is the better player. I know some people don't want to have that conversation, but that's
I just don't
what
think
it
that's
is.
a debate. I can sit here
Yeah.
like argue a wall. If you don't like that statement, argue a wall because that is not a debate at this point in time.
And
I'm sorry.
it's good to have. It's like I've started to see the meme going around where it's like, oh boy, like two cakes. Like, it's so great to have both Jaylen and Jason on the team. It's perfectly fine when you have a roster built and catered to that skill set and to maximize it. We saw that in 2024. If it weren't for the fact that the CBA is just terrible, it's just a nightmare. If it weren't for the fact of that, we would have seen this roster run it back with those guys with some minor changes for at least another season. I think you could justify it if you had done better. But the fact that they now had back-to-back years where they got bounced in the playoffs further earlier than they wanted to, they had opportunities to win games that they failed to. Whether it was when Jason Tatum went down, the Celtics just fell apart against the Knicks, and that sort of sealed their fate that year, or being up 3-1 and blowing that 3-1 lead and then having a chance for you're not going to force Jason Tatum to play Game 7 if he's not healthy coming off of that Achilles. I'm sorry. Like,
It's not, and that was always
right
a risk,
decision.
right?
Yeah.
And look, you've touched on something here that I just want to put out there that you said it, and it reminded me of the instances where it happened. We all knew that Jaylen Brown was a risk not to make it to the end of this contract in Boston. All of us said at the time, and by all of us, I mean at least 75% of Celtics fans knew that by the third year in this contract, second to third year in this Supermax, the Celtics would probably look to trade him because it'd get too expensive and you'd be able to flip him in his prime and get loads of assets back. We're there. That's where we are right now. We said this could happen. Everybody said this could happen. And now it's happening. So to act surprised when it was predicted over and over and over again to now get here and be like, well, why are the Celtics doing this? Well, we spoke about it.
It was an inevitability.
The royal we spoke about this on multiple occasions leading up to now. Does it suck? Sure. Is it necessary? Most likely, because it's a lot harder to build around these two guys when you're trying to avoid the repeat attacks. That's the other part of this whole thing. It's not that the Celtics don't have the ability to spend a little bit more. They have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. They have a $27 million TPE. They can go back into the tax if they want. The problem is, if you do that, the repeater starts all over again. It's easier to just cleanse it again this year and then be able to spend into the aprons next season without the additional whatever the tax is. It's like 8 cents on, or like 80 cents to the dollar tax. It's just ridiculous. And you can see that this is kind of what they're trying to do. And if they can move Brown now, get pieces back, hopefully, if they do have to take on a large contract to kind of level out the salary match, and hopefully it's a 1-year deal. So then that comes off the books next summer, and the Celtics are in a position to really push the boat out and ramp up and figure out whatever missing pieces they have. But you mentioned it when you said, oh, Brown signed this extension and we knew it was a possibility. We did. And I think that's a really key point to point out right now, because there's two camps. There's pro trade Jaylen Brown, there's do not trade Jaylen Brown. And it doesn't matter which one you fall in. You would have heard these conversations leading up to where we are right now. And it doesn't matter who they get back, whatever. This feels like, and I want to do a temperature check right now. To me, I feel like it's a 75% chance Brown's traded before the start of the season.
I say
What's your
higher.
temperature? You want to go higher? What, you're going to 85, 90?
I would say 80 to 85. I feel pretty confident in it happening. And I will say this, Thankfully, it's not going to be to Charlotte for taking on the Miles Bridges contract because I just
Yeah,
want
I didn't
nothing to
want
do with
him.
him. I don't want anything to do with him as a player. Nothing to do with skill
Or as a
set. We all
person.
know why I wouldn't want it. I'm happy to not have to worry about having a guy on the roster like that, even if it is just going to be an expiring deal. I think with the Celtics too, with even with before all of this stuff happened with Giannis, like we talked about with this contract, the alternative was to let Jaylen Brown walk for nothing or to try and trade him a few years back. And clearly that wasn't the right move then
I mean,
because
they
now
tried to trade him, let's be fair.
they did. They softly tried to trade him. They were like, "Hey, this is a potential trade package." They didn't originally get a bite on it, and so they kind of buried it. And like it's still been brought up, but very much on the perimeter, I would say, like on the fringes. Same thing with like the Nets talks about trying to get KD. That's like the big one that I can think of in recent memory, at least. But the fact of the matter is they now still have to make this move. And with all of the pressure mounting, whether you feel like his value's gotten tanked or not, a trade's happening. You had mentioned it before, and I'll say this though. Portland is not like a team that like, oh, we now have to turn to Portland as a potential trade partner.
They're
They've been
actually
one
a
of
good.
they've been one of the teams that's been tied into it from the beginning. Like since they were even before Giannis talks, like the Celtics got involved in those. Portland was still a team that was interested in JP. It was Portland, it was Atlanta, it was Houston. Those are the three that were interested. Portland's been along for the ride the entire way. So
I
for
will
me,
say as well,
that's the
like
team you try to get picks out of and stuff.
they're
Sorry, go
also a
ahead.
team that had no, I'm agreeing with you here. I feel like they're also one of the teams that you want to trade with because of the amount of picks that they can give you. And look, if you
Players.
need to take back a big salary to make it work with Portland, I would happily welcome Drew Holiday back to the Celtics.
I would like that.
I'm down. Fine. I think the Celtics missed Drew Holiday a lot more than what they thought they would, or a lot more than what we thought they would. I'm sure they knew they'd miss him. And for anyone that was like Drew's washed, he had a fantastic season over in Portland when healthy.
He did.
Bring him back. I'm all for that. And then throw in your Tamani Kamara, hopefully your Donovan Klingon or your Scoot Henderson. I think I'd want Scoot Henderson just because I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential there that the Celtics
Agreed.
would help develop.
Mhm.
And look, if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. You still get Kamara, you still get the draft picks. You just move on from Scoot in a separate trade down the line. And then if you want Shaden Sharp, whatever, obviously you need to make some room for these as well. And I think this is another area that could be telling. The Celtics have a bunch of team options they need to make decisions on by tomorrow, by Monday. So if I post this on Monday by today, if I post this on Sunday by tomorrow, it just depends when I get around to editing. What they choose to do with these young guys on these team options and how many roster spots they create will tell you a lot about what they're trying to bring back as part of a Jaylen Brown deal, or whether they're expecting a Jaylen Brown deal to go down. If they just pick everyone's team option up and we're down to like one or two roster spots, and you're still going to need to go and find a big, maybe you find someone in free agency, then I'm going to start questioning how things are going to shake out. Why would they do that? If they start cutting deals, if they don't pick up Jordan Walsh's option, Amari Williams, Max Shulgas down the line, now I feel like a trade's imminent. Now I feel like maybe in the next day or two we'd see some movement because they're making the moves to create the roster space now so they don't have to waive guys later. Just pointing that out that could be a little bit of a telltale sign tomorrow or today, depending on when you're watching / listening.
Yeah, and I mean it's so many moves I feel like have been held up because of it beyond just the Celtics and the multiple team options they have to worry about. The rest of the league's also trying to figure out what the Celtics are going to do and where he's going to move because there are teams that are interested or teams that have expressed some interest. The Raptors are another team that got mentioned. Denver, the Nuggets. Denver's got a whole other situation they're going to potentially have to worry about. People are saying Jokic doesn't want out or anything like that. I'm like, that's all well and good, but he's going to turn 32 in February. He's got one more year left on his deal, and then he needs to talk extension. So they're not far off from where the Celtics are, except the situation is you have to keep Jokic happy, and that's a guy that you would gladly extend and try and keep happy. But they're also limited in terms of what moves they can make. So like any deal that you try and do with them, it's probably Cam Johnson or Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray coming back. Jamal Murray, great player and everything. I just don't want any part of that based on his injuries and everything. And Aaron Gordon is a player that the Celtics had wanted for years.
And the picks aren't valuable. It's the
It
same thing as why
yeah.
Milwaukee weren't. Sorry to cut you. It's the
No,
same
no,
reason as
you're
why
right.
Milwaukee wasn't interested
Yeah,
in Boston's picks versus
exactly.
Miami's.
Mhm.
Like you said, because Boston's are going to be late first round picks, and there's a chance. Obviously, the lottery reform and the draft reform kind of changes this a little bit, but there's a chance Miami's are going to be mid first rounders, potentially late lottery picks. Boston are going to feel the same way about Denver as what Milwaukee did about Boston. Why are we going to take picks from you when we're still going to be picking at the back end of the first round? Because we're going to be doing that anyway with our own goddamn picks. We want a team where we could potentially be mid first round, or we can at least sell them as that in a trade package while we're trying to upgrade using these picks and rerouting them wherever they need to go.
I think getting multiple first round picks from different teams is actually kind of the strategy. I think that's like the good strategy
Yeah.
moving forward. And that's a good reason why like Portland would also be a good dance partner because they have a couple different first rounders from different teams, including a bunch from Milwaukee, who, for what we know, is going to be bad for a little while. Even if they manage to put some kind of fringe, 9 or 10 seed roster together, it serves them more to just be bad, and to
Those
just kind
draft
of
picks
build
are
talent.
liquid gold, dude.
Yeah.
Like you can flip them at a great premium. You can
Mhm.
keep them and have a chance of a lottery pick. It's a Sam Presti type pickup if you do that. And if I'm Boston, I would want Portland among the front runners of the Jaylen Brown trade talks. And I would be doing whatever I can to be like, fine, you don't want to give me Donovan Klinger? I'm cool
More
with that. But
picks.
I want all of Milwaukee's picks that you own, point blank period, plus some of your own. And
Mhm.
then we
Mhm.
can talk about how we're going to make the money work. And I think Portland would do it because I think Denny Avija has proved that he can work with pretty much most forwards and guards and bigs, just anybody, just because of his skill set. I think Brown would come in and get to be the tier, like the 1A on that team instantly. So he'd be happy. And I think he just fits the culture right, the way they've tried to build up. Now, obviously, it's a bit different now. Obviously, everything going on with Billups, it's not the same like hard nosed culture he was instilling, but they played great under Thiago Splitter this year. They were a really tough team to play. And I know they've just picked up a guy who's on a 1 year deal, which is crazy in itself. But I've got a feeling he's going to build on that defense first identity. And Brown is a guy that could come in and really thrive in that type of environment as a 1A. So I'd be pushing a deal. And look, Boston have got his recent history of making deals with Portland, different front office, no, different ownership, similar front office. So I'm going to leave it there and say Portland would be my preferred destination to trade with. Any more thoughts?
No, I would say either Portland or New Orleans, but I think New
Yeah.
Orleans is the team that you're waiting to get involved, once you figure out the JB situation, because I think they're gonna be the dance partner for Trey Murphy, obviously, so I think that's the big one they're waiting on.
Until Trey Murphy gets traded because this all takes too long. Now, this is the other point, and I'll end it
Yeah.
here. I think the Celtics need to continue going about their business in free agency and looking at other pieces because sometimes you can hold on too long trying to get one deal over the line and the other deals that you might have been involved in or got over the line pass you by. It's hard, man. You can't be everywhere all at once. This is getting super interesting, though. I think sooner or later we need a resolution. Right now, it feels like we're still going to stay on the hamster wheel for a little while longer. If you've made it this far, show some love, hit that comment button, that subscribe button. Make sure you hype the video on YouTube. Make sure you leave a review on Apple or Spotify, depending on where you're listening. And we will catch you again soon. Deuces.
Cheers.